Billionaire divorces his wife, not knowing she's pregnant. 18 years later, his expensive ex calls for help. The private line rang at precisely 11:47 p.m. I need you, Blake. After 18 years of silence, I wouldn't call if there was any other choice. Blake Mitchell's hand froze on his crystal tumbler, the amber whiskey catching the moonlight that streamed through his penthouse windows. That voice. He would have recognized it anywhere, even after all this time. Vanessa. His voice emerged as a whisper, the name feeling foreign on his tongue after nearly 2 decades of deliberately not speaking it. How did you get this number? A pause. Then, does it matter? What matters is that I have a secret that's about to change your life forever. Blake's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. What could possibly break the wall of silence between them after all these years? What kind of secret? He asked, setting down his glass, suddenly alert. Not over the phone. Her voice cracked slightly. I need you to come to Boston General Hospital, 6th floor, room 612. Hospital? Are you go? It's not me, Blake. The weight in her words sent a chill down his spine. It's your daughter. Blake's world tilted on its axis. My daughter? The daughter you never knew existed. The one I was carrying when you signed those divorce papers 18 years ago. Vanessa's voice hardened. She's dying, Blake. And you're the only one who can save her. The phone slipped from Blake's fingers, clattering onto his imported marble floor. A daughter. For 18 years, he had built an empire, amassed billions, constructed the perfect life of solitary success. And now, with one phone call, the foundation of that life was crumbling beneath him. Who was this girl who shared his blood? What was killing her? And why, after nearly 2 decades of silence, was Vanessa reaching out now? As Blake stared at the New York skyline that had once represented everything he'd achieved, he realized how hollow it all suddenly felt. Within minutes, he was on the phone to his pilot. Prepare the jet. We're flying to Boston tonight. Blake Mitchell woke at precisely 5:30 a.m. every morning. No alarm needed. 18 years of routine had programmed his body with military precision. The morning sun streamed through automated blinds in his Central Park penthouse, bathing the minimalist bedroom in golden light. Another day at the top of the world. The Mitchell Empire, a real estate colossus spanning luxury developments, commercial properties, and technological innovation, continued its relentless expansion under his exacting vision. Blake completed his usual morning rituals with practiced efficiency. 60 minutes of high-intensity training with his personal trainer in his home gym. A precisely calibrated protein shake prepared by his personal chef. A steaming shower in his marble bathroom with its panoramic view of the city he partially owned. By 7:45 a.m., he sat in the back of his customized Mercedes as it glided through Manhattan traffic toward Mitchell Tower, the gleaming 78-story headquarters of Mitchell Industries. His driver, Thomas, knew better than to attempt conversation during these morning commutes. This was Blake's time to review overnight developments in Asian markets and prepare for the day ahead. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. His executive assistant, Rebecca, greeted him as he stepped off the private elevator on the 78th floor. She fell into step beside him, rattling off his schedule with practiced precision. The Tokyo deal closed overnight. Final numbers exceeded projections by 12%. The London team needs your decision on the Riverside project by noon our time. Board meeting at 11. Lunch with Mayor Wilson at 1. The Princeton commencement speech draft is ready for your review. And Mr. Ellis, from the Chronicle, is still requesting that profile interview. Blake nodded, barely registering the details. He'd been doing this dance so long he could anticipate every step. Tell Ellis, I'm still not interested. Push the London decision to tomorrow. I want revised projections based on the exchange rate fluctuations. Rebecca nodded, making notes on her tablet. And the charity gala this evening? What charity is it again? Blake asked, stepping into his expansive corner office. Children's cancer research, sir. Right, have the usual donation prepared. Double it, actually. But send my regrets. I'll be working late. Blake settled behind his desk, its polished surface empty save for a single monitor and a small, framed photo, the only personal item in the entire office. It showed a much younger Blake standing beside his father in front of their first development property, John Mitchell had started the company with a single apartment building in Queens. Blake had transformed it into a global powerhouse. The day proceeded with clockwork efficiency. Decisions made, deals closed, fortunes changed with the stroke of a pen or the nod of his head. Blake Mitchell had mastered this world. At 45, he had achieved more than most could imagine in several lifetimes. Forbes listed him as the 11th wealthiest person in America. Time had named him among the 100 most influential people in the world 3 years running. His name was synonymous with success, vision, and uncompromising excellence. What nobody knew, what Blake himself rarely acknowledged, was how empty it all felt. At precisely 7:13 p.m., as Blake reviewed architectural plans for a revolutionary mixed-use development in Chicago, his private line rang. He glanced at the caller ID, unknown number. Blake almost ignored it. He had strict protocols for communication, but something, perhaps the monotony of another predictable day, prompted him to answer, "Blake Mitchell." Silence on the other end. Then, a female voice, hesitant, familiar, in a way that sent an electric current down his spine. "I need you, Blake. After 18 years of silence, I wouldn't call if there was any other choice." Blake Mitchell's hand froze on his crystal tumbler, the amber whiskey catching the moonlight that streamed through his penthouse windows. That voice, he would have recognized it anywhere, even after all this time. "Vanessa?" His voice emerged as a whisper, the name feeling foreign on his tongue, after nearly 2 decades of deliberately not speaking it. "How did you get this number?" A pause. "Then, does it matter?" "What matters is that I have a secret that's about to change your life forever." Blake's mind raced through possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. What could possibly break the wall of silence between them after all these years? "What kind of secret?" he asked, setting down his glass, suddenly alert. "Not over the phone." Her voice cracked slightly. "I need you to come to Boston General Hospital. 6th floor, room 612. "Hospital? Are you have—" "It's not me, Blake." The weight in her word sent a chill down his spine. "It's your daughter." Blake's world tilted on its axis. "My daughter?" "The daughter you never knew existed. The one I was carrying when you signed those divorce papers 18 years ago." Vanessa's voice hardened. "She's dying, Blake, and you're the only one who can save her." The phone slipped from Blake's fingers, clattering onto his imported marble floor. A daughter. For 18 years, he had built an empire, amassed billions, constructed the perfect life of solitary success. And now, with one phone call, the foundation of that life was crumbling beneath him. Who was this girl who shared his blood? What was killing her? And why, after nearly 2 decades of silence, was Vanessa reaching out now? As Blake stared at the New York skyline that had once represented everything he'd achieved, he realized how hollow it all suddenly felt. Within minutes, he was on the phone to his pilot. "Prepare the jet. We're flying to Boston tonight." The helicopter cut through the night sky over the eastern seaboard, its blades slicing the air with mechanical precision. Blake sat rigid in his seat, hands gripping his knees, mind racing faster than the aircraft carrying him to Boston. A daughter. He had a daughter. The reality refused to settle properly in his mind, like a puzzle piece being forced into the wrong space. How could Vanessa have kept this from him? How could he have a child, an 18-year-old child, and know nothing about her existence until tonight? Blake closed his eyes, the memories he'd locked away for nearly 2 decades, now flooding back with merciless clarity. He and Vanessa had met at Columbia. He was an ambitious business major with plans to revolutionize his father's modest real estate company. She was studying architecture, brilliant and passionate about sustainable urban design. They were young, driven, hopelessly in love. They married at 23, right after graduation. For 3 years, they were inseparable partners in both life and business. Vanessa designed their first major development, an innovative mixed-income housing project that put Mitchell Properties on the map. Blake secured the financing, navigated the politics, and charmed the investors. Then came the opportunity that would change everything, a chance to acquire a struggling competitor with prime Manhattan properties. The risk was enormous. The potential reward, greater still. Blake became obsessed, working 18-hour days, leveraging everything they had. Vanessa had objected. The risk was too great, she argued. They needed stability, not more ambition. They needed time for each other, for building a family. Their arguments escalated. Ultimatums were issued. Neither would bend. The day Vanessa walked out, Blake had been too angry, too certain of his vision to go after her. When divorce papers arrived 2 weeks later, he signed them without contest, believing he was doing what was best for both of them. The acquisition went through. Mitchell Properties doubled in size overnight. Blake Mitchell took his first step toward becoming a billionaire. And apparently, unknown to him, a father. The helicopter pilot's voice crackled through his headset. 10 minutes to Boston General, Mr. Mitchell. Blake opened his eyes, the memory dissolving. Thank you. He'd spent 18 years building an empire, accumulating more wealth than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He'd dated models, actresses, fellow CEOs. None had lasted. None had penetrated the armor he'd built around himself after Vanessa. And now this. A daughter with a nameless condition. A dying daughter who had never known her father. Blake Mitchell, master of negotiation, controller of outcomes, found himself utterly unprepared for what awaited him. Boston General Hospital hummed with the quiet efficiency of a major medical facility after hours. Blake strode through the main entrance, his tailored suit and commanding presence drawing curious glances from the night staff. He ignored them, heading directly for the elevators. 6th floor, room 612. With each floor the elevator climbed, Blake felt his carefully constructed composure cracking. What would he say? What could he possibly say to a daughter who had lived her entire life without him? To Vanessa, the woman whose heart he had broken and who had kept such a monumental secret from him? The elevator doors opened. Blake stepped into the quiet hallway, his footsteps muffled on the institutional carpeting. He followed the room numbers until he stood before 612. Through the small window in the door, he could see a hospital bed and medical equipment, but not its occupant. He hesitated, hand raised to knock. For the first time in his adult life, Blake Mitchell was afraid. The door opened unexpectedly, and there she was, Vanessa Reynolds, 18 years older than when he'd last seen her, but unmistakably, the woman who had once been the center of his world. Her blonde hair was shorter now, streaked with elegant silver at the temples. Fine lines marked the corners of her eyes and mouth. She wore no makeup, and dark circles beneath her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. But her posture remained straight, her gaze direct and unflinching as it met his. "You came," she said simply. "You said she's dying," Blake replied, his voice low and controlled despite the turmoil inside him. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Vanessa studied him for a long moment. "I honestly didn't know." She stepped back, allowing him to enter the room. Blake moved past her, immediately looking toward the hospital bed. The girl, his daughter, lay sleeping, her face partially obscured by an oxygen mask. She was thin, painfully so, her complexion ashen against the white hospital linens. Dark hair, his coloring, not Vanessa's, fanned across the pillow. Even in sleep, her features reflected a striking blend of them both. Vanessa's delicate nose and cheekbones, his strong jaw and brow. Blake felt his chest constrict. This was his child, his blood, a human being he had helped create, and then unknowingly abandoned. "Her name is Chloe," Vanessa said softly, moving to stand on the opposite side of the bed. "Chloe Elizabeth Reynolds." "Reynolds," Blake repeated, the significance not lost on him. She didn't carry his name. Vanessa's expression hardened slightly. "Yes, Reynolds. I raised her alone, Blake. She's a Reynolds." Blake dragged his gaze from the sleeping girl to meet Vanessa's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me? All these years. Why?" Vanessa crossed her arms, a defensive gesture he remembered from their marriage. "I tried to tell you. The day I left, I told you I was late." "You were too busy with the Henderson acquisition to even look up from your spreadsheets." Blake searched his memory, but found nothing. Had he really been so absorbed in business that he'd missed something so crucial? 2 weeks later, I confirmed it, Vanessa continued. "I called your office. Your assistant said you were in meetings all day. I left a message asking you to call me about an urgent personal matter." She gave a bitter laugh. "You sent a text saying all personal matters should go through your lawyer." Blake winced. He vaguely remembered that exchange, remembered the cold fury he'd felt. the determination not to let Vanessa's departure derail his ambitions. "So that's it?" he asked. "One missed call, one message, and you decided to never tell me about my own child?" "Don't you dare," Vanessa hissed, mindful of their sleeping daughter. "Don't you dare put this on me. You made your choice crystal clear, Blake." "Your precious company meant everything. I meant nothing. Our marriage meant nothing. Why would a child have changed that equation for you?" Before Blake could respond, a small voice interrupted. "Mom? Who are you talking to?" They both turned. Chloe's eyes were open, looking curiously between them. Blake felt a physical shock as he stared into them. They were his eyes, exactly an unusual shade of amber that had come from his own father. Vanessa immediately softened, moving closer to smooth Chloe's hair. "Hey, sweetie, I didn't mean to wake you." "It's okay." Chloe's voice was weak but clear behind the oxygen mask. She turned her gaze fully to Blake. "Are you a new doctor?" Blake stood frozen, unable to form words. This moment, his first conversation with his daughter, was completely beyond his experience or preparation. Vanessa glanced at him, then back to Chloe. "No, honey, this is Blake Mitchell. She hesitated. "I'm a specialist," Blake supplied, finding his voice at last. "Your mother contacted me about your case." It wasn't entirely a lie. Not yet. Not until he understood what was happening and why Vanessa had finally reached out to him. Chloe studied him with an intensity that was disconcertingly familiar. It was the same penetrating gaze he used in negotiations. "You don't look like a doctor. You look like a businessman." The corner of Blake's mouth twitched. Sharp. "Like him. I am that too." "Chloe needs to rest," Vanessa interjected. "Blake, could I speak with you outside?" Blake nodded, still unable to tear his gaze from the girl from his daughter. "It was nice to meet you, Chloe. I hope I can help." Chloe's eyes narrowed slightly in assessment. "Nice to meet you too, Mr. Mitchell." In the hallway, Vanessa led him to a small waiting area, mercifully empty at this hour. They sat on opposite ends of an uncomfortable sofa, the physical distance between them, a perfect metaphor for the chasm of years and secrets. "She doesn't know who I am," Blake stated flatly. "No," Vanessa confirmed. "I've told her that her father wasn't ready for a family, that he chose his career instead. I never mentioned your name, but she must have seen me in the news, in business publications." "Chloe isn't interested in the business world," Vanessa interrupted. "She's an artist, a musician. Her world is creative, not corporate." Blake absorbed this new information about his daughter with a strange mixture of pride and loss. "Tell me what's wrong with her. What did you mean when you said she's dying?" Vanessa took a deep breath, her composure finally cracking. "It's called Holt-Wilson syndrome. It's incredibly rare, a progressive disorder of the blood and immune system. Her bone marrow is failing. She needs specialized treatment, possibly a stem cell transplant. And you can't afford it," Blake concluded. "That's why you've finally decided to tell me about her. You need money." The flash of anger in Vanessa's eyes was immediate. "I don't want your money, Blake. I never have. I've supported us just fine for 18 years. Then what do you need from me?" "Compatibility," Vanessa said simply. "The treatments she needs require genetic matching. I'm not compatible. Our only hope is that you might be." Blake's anger deflated as quickly as it had risen. This wasn't about money or the past. This was about Chloe's survival. "What do I need to do?" he asked. "Blood tests first," Vanessa explained. "If you're a potential match, there would be more extensive testing, possibly bone marrow donation." "I'll do whatever is necessary," Blake said without hesitation. "Set it up tomorrow." Vanessa nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "The medical team will be here at 8 a.m. They already have your name." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 18 years and their current crisis hanging between them. "Where do you live now?" Blake finally asked. "Boston?" "Cambridge," Vanessa replied. "I teach architectural design at MIT. Chloe's starting there in the fall." Her voice caught. "If she's well enough." Blake nodded, processing this glimpse into the life his ex-wife and daughter had built without him. "And you never, He hesitated, then continued. You never remarried? Vanessa gave him a measured look. No. There was someone, for a few years when Chloe was young. It didn't work out. She paused. And you? I've seen the tabloid headlines over the years. Blake shrugged. Nothing meaningful. Nothing that lasted. Another silence fell between them, less tense than before. I would have been there, Blake said finally, his voice low and intense. If I had known about her, Vanessa. Whatever you think of me, however much you hate me for choosing business over our marriage, you should know that I would have been there for my child. Vanessa looked away. Maybe, but the man I left wouldn't have been the father she deserved. She stood up. It's late. You should get some rest before tomorrow's tests. There's a hotel across the street where many patient families stay. Blake stood as well. I'll make arrangements. What time can I come back in the morning? Tests are at 8. You can come at 7:30. Vanessa hesitated, then added, Thank you for coming, Blake. Whatever happens, thank you for that. Blake watched her walk back toward Chloe's room, her shoulders straight despite the obvious weight she carried. Then he pulled out his phone to make arrangements for an indefinite stay in Boston. His empire would have to run without him for a while. Right now, nothing mattered except the dying girl with his eyes. Blake arrived at the hospital at precisely 7:25 the next morning. Having barely slept, his mind had raced all night, calculating the magnitude of what he discovered. He had a child. He'd missed her entire life. She was gravely ill. These facts refused to settle into any sort of acceptable pattern. He'd spent hours researching Holt-Wilson syndrome on his tablet, reading medical journals and case studies. The information was sparse and mostly grim. Rare genetic disorder, progressive deterioration of bone marrow function, high mortality rate without intervention, experimental treatments showing promise in limited cases. Blake Mitchell had built his fortune by identifying problems and solving them with resources, connections, and sheer force of will. This situation would be no different. If money could fix this, he had plenty. If connections were needed, he would leverage every relationship he'd cultivated over 2 decades. If cutting-edge research was required, he would fund it himself. But first, he needed to know if he was compatible. Blake strode through the hospital entrance, carrying a briefcase and a cardboard tray with 3 coffees, one for himself, one for Vanessa, and one for Dr. Lindstrom, the specialist he'd spoken with by phone at 6 a.m. It was a small gesture, almost laughably inadequate given the circumstances, but Blake had never arrived anywhere empty-handed. As he approached Chloe's room, he heard music, piano music, delicate and complex, flowing from a Bluetooth speaker. Blake paused outside the door, momentarily transfixed. Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. His father had played classical piano, and this piece had been a favorite. Blake himself had studied piano seriously until business consumed his life. He knocked lightly, then entered. The music stopped abruptly as Chloe looked up from her phone. She was sitting up in bed, looking marginally better than the previous night, though still alarmingly pale. Vanessa sat in a chair beside her, a laptop open on her knees. "Good morning," Blake said, his business persona automatically taking over in the face of uncertainty. "I brought coffee." He crossed to Vanessa, offering the tray. "Black. 1 sugar. If you still take it that way." Vanessa looked surprised. "I do, thank you." Blake turned to Chloe. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what you might like to drink." "I'm not allowed caffeine with my medications," Chloe replied, studying him with that unnervingly direct gaze. "But thanks for thinking of Mom." Blake nodded, feeling oddly chastened. "That was Chopin you were playing when I came in?" Chloe raised her eyebrows slightly. "You know classical music?" "Some," Blake acknowledged. "My father played. I studied for years as well." "Mom said you're some kind of medical specialist?" Chloe pressed, clearly skeptical. "But you look like the guys on the business channels, and you know Chopin." Blake glanced at Vanessa, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Not yet." "I'm here to see if I can help with your treatment," Blake replied carefully. "The medical team will explain more." As if on cue, the door opened, and a tall woman in a lab coat entered, followed by 2 younger doctors. "Good morning, Chloe, Miss Reynolds." She turned to Blake. You must be Mr. Mitchell. I'm Dr. Catherine Lindstrom. Blake offered the remaining coffee. Doctor, thank you for taking my call this morning. Dr. Lindstrom accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Shall we discuss the procedure privately first? No need, Chloe interjected. I know what's happening. You're testing him to see if he's a compatible donor for the new treatment protocol. She turned her amber gaze on Blake. What I don't understand is why you, specifically. The room fell silent. Blake looked to Vanessa, who closed her eyes briefly before meeting her daughter's inquiring gaze. Chloe, Vanessa began, her voice gentle but firm. There's something I haven't told you. Something I should have explained before now, but I was waiting for the right moment. Chloe's expression shifted from curiosity to wariness. What is it? Vanessa moved to sit on the edge of the bed, taking Chloe's hand. Mr. Mitchell isn't just a specialist. He's... She took a deep breath. He's your biological father. Chloe went completely still, her gaze moving from her mother to Blake and back again. My father, she repeated, her voice unnaturally flat. Yes, Vanessa confirmed. We were married very young. We divorced before I knew I was pregnant with you. Chloe pulled her hand away from her mother's. And you never told him about me? Vanessa hesitated. It's complicated, honey. We both made choices. Not that complicated, Chloe interrupted, her voice now sharp with anger. You either tell someone they have a kid or you don't. She turned to Blake. And you never wondered? Never tried to find out if your ex-wife might have been pregnant when you divorced? Blake felt the accusation like a physical blow. I didn't know, Chloe. If you had, what? Chloe challenged. You'd have been Father of the Year? Please. Mom told me enough to know you chose your business over your marriage. That's enough, Chloe, Vanessa said firmly. This isn't helping. What would help, Doctor? Lindstrom interjected with practiced diplomatic skill, is if we could proceed with the testing. Mr. Mitchell's genetic compatibility could be crucial to your treatment plan, Chloe. Chloe's hands clenched the hospital blanket. Fine. Test him. Use whatever parts of him might keep me alive. Her voice broke slightly. It's not like I need a father at this point anyway. The words hit Blake with surprising force, considering they came from someone he'd only just met. But this wasn't just anyone. This was his daughter, his flesh and blood. And she was rejecting him before he'd even had a chance to know her. Dr. Lindstrom cleared her throat. Why don't we give Chloe some space? Mr. Mitchell, if you'll come with me, we can begin the blood work. Miss Reynolds, perhaps you'd like to join us to discuss the potential next steps? Vanessa nodded, squeezing Chloe's hand despite her daughter's obvious anger. We'll be back soon, sweetie. Try to rest. Chloe turned her face away, reaching for her earbuds. The Chopin began again as they left the room, the melancholy notes following them into the hallway. It's a match. Dr. Lindstrom's words echoed in Blake's mind as he stood at the window of his hotel suite later that day, gazing blindly at the Boston skyline. He was a match. He could help save Chloe's life. The relief had been immediate and overwhelming. But the journey ahead was complex. The treatment protocol would require multiple procedures over several weeks. Blake would need to remain in Boston for at least a month, possibly longer depending on Chloe's response. His phone had been ringing constantly since he'd informed his executive team that he'd be working remotely indefinitely. A family emergency, he'd said. The words felt foreign on his tongue. He'd never used family as an excuse for anything in his professional life. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Blake crossed the spacious suite and opened the door, surprised to find Vanessa standing there. May I come in? She asked. Blake stepped back, gesturing her inside. Of course. How's Chloe? Processing, Vanessa replied, entering the suite and glancing around at the luxury accommodations. You always did prefer the best rooms. Force of habit, Blake said, closing the door. Can I get you anything? There's a fully stocked bar, or I can order room service. Vanessa shook her head. No, thank you. I can't stay long. Chloe's friend is sitting with her, but I told her I'd be back within the hour. Blake nodded, indicating the sitting area. They sat across from each other, the coffee table between them like a demilitarized zone. Dr. Lindstrom told you about the match? Vanessa asked. Yes. She explained the treatment protocol. I'll need to stay in Boston for the duration. That's why I'm here, Vanessa said. I know you have a company to run. If there are alternatives— There aren't, Blake interrupted firmly. I'm staying. Mitchell Industries has an excellent management team. They'll handle things. Vanessa studied him. This isn't a short-term commitment, Blake. The protocol could take months. Even if it's successful, Chloe will need ongoing support during recovery. I understand that. Do you? Vanessa challenged. Because the Blake Mitchell I knew couldn't go a day without checking the markets, much less step away from his company for months. Blake felt a flare of the old anger, the defensiveness that had characterized the end of their marriage. He took a breath, letting it pass. I'm not the same man I was 18 years ago, he said quietly. And even if I were, this is different. This is my daughter's life. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. She's angry, Blake, and confused. Finding out about you like this, under these circumstances, it's a lot to process. I understand that too, Blake replied. I don't expect her to welcome me with open arms, but I'm here now, and I'm staying. Not just for the medical procedures, but to get to know her, if she'll let me. Vanessa nodded, seeming to accept his sincerity. There's something else you should know, something I didn't mention at the hospital. Blake tensed, preparing himself for more unwelcome revelations. The experimental treatment, Vanessa continued, it's not covered by insurance. It's part of a clinical trial, but there are significant out-of-pocket costs. She straightened, pride evident in her posture. I've liquidated my retirement account and taken a second mortgage on my house, but I'm still short. I was hoping you might— Consider it done, Blake said immediately. Whatever the cost. And don't liquidate anything, Vanessa. I'll cover everything. Vanessa's pride visibly warred with maternal pragmatism. This isn't about child support or obligations, Blake. This is about our daughter, Blake finished for her. And it's the least I can do after missing 18 years of her life. He reached for his tablet on the coffee table. How much do you need for the initial phase? I can transfer funds immediately. Vanessa named a sum that would be significant for most people, but represented less than a day's earnings for Blake's company. He nodded and made the transfer on the spot, sending confirmation to Vanessa's email. Thank you, Vanessa said, the words clearly difficult for her. I wouldn't ask if— I know, Blake assured her. You don't need to explain. They sat in silence for a moment, the years between them suddenly less vast. She's remarkable, Blake, Vanessa said softly. Even before she got sick. Brilliant, talented, strong-willed. She was playing piano by 4, composing her own pieces by 10. She's won national competitions. MIT accepted her with a full scholarship for their music and technology program. Pride swelled in Blake's chest for achievements he'd had no part in. She got her talent from you, and her determination. Vanessa smiled slightly. The determination is all you. You should see her when she's working on a difficult composition. She gets the same look you used to get when analyzing investment opportunities, like nothing in the world could distract her. The comparison pleased Blake more than he cared to admit. Tell me more about her. Everything. For the next half hour, Vanessa shared stories of Chloe's childhood, her first steps, her first words, her first piano recital. Each anecdote was a sharp reminder of all Blake had missed, but also a gift, filling in the outline of the daughter he was just beginning to know. I should get back, Vanessa said eventually, checking her watch. Chloe will be wondering where I am. Blake stood when she did. When can I see her again? The first procedure isn't scheduled until Friday. Give her some time, Blake, Vanessa advised. Today was a shock for her. Let her reach out when she's ready. Blake wanted to object, to insist on being present, but he recognized the wisdom in Vanessa's words. All right, but please, tell her I'm here. Not just as a donor, but as whatever she needs me to be. Vanessa nodded. I will. She moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, Blake, I am sorry I didn't try harder to tell you about her. Whatever our problems were, you had a right to know your child. Before Blake could respond, Vanessa was gone, leaving him alone with the weight of missed opportunities and the fragile hope of redemption. 3 days passed with no word from either Vanessa or Chloe. Blake threw himself into work remotely, setting up a makeshift office in his hotel suite. He held video conferences, reviewed contracts, and authorized acquisitions, all while researching everything he could find about Holt-Wilson syndrome and its experimental treatments. He also made discreet inquiries about Vanessa's financial situation. What he discovered troubled him. Her position at MIT paid well, but the cost of living in Cambridge was high. Medical bills had clearly strained her resources long before this latest crisis. The second mortgage she'd mentioned would put her underwater on the modest home she owned. Blake instructed his financial team to create a trust for Chloe, not just for her medical expenses, but for her education, housing, and future security. He also arranged for Vanessa's mortgages to be quietly purchased and forgiven, though he kept this information to himself for now. Vanessa's pride would make such assistance difficult to accept. On the fourth day, as Blake was reviewing architectural plans for a development in Seattle, his phone rang. Chloe's name appeared on the screen he'd programmed it in after their first meeting, though he'd never called it. Blake answered immediately. "Chloe?" "Mr. Mitchell." Her voice sounded stronger than it had in the hospital, but still cautious. "My mom said you're staying in Boston." "That's right," Blake confirmed. "I'll be here as long as necessary for your treatment." A pause. "Don't you have a company to run?" "I do," Blake acknowledged. "But some things are more important." Another pause, longer this time. "I'd like to meet you. Not in the hospital, somewhere normal." Blake's heart quickened.
"Of course, wherever you'd like."
"There's a cafe near the hospital called Riverside Roasters. Tomorrow at 2, if I'm feeling up to it." "I'll be there," Blake promised. "But only if your doctors approve. Your health comes first." "Fine," Chloe agreed. "Just so we're clear, I'm not looking for a father figure. I just have questions." "I understand," Blake said, though the words stung. "I'll answer whatever I can." "Good. See you tomorrow, maybe." The call ended abruptly. Blake set down his phone, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation coursing through him. Chloe wanted to meet him, to ask questions. It was a start. The following day, Blake arrived at Riverside Roasters 30 minutes early. He secured a quiet table in the corner, ordered coffee for himself, and asked the barista to hold a hot chocolate ready for Chloe if she wanted it. Then he waited, checking his watch every few minutes, wondering if she would actually come. At precisely 2 p.m., the cafe door opened and Chloe entered, followed by a young man Blake hadn't seen before. She looked better than she had in the hospital, still thin, still pale, but dressed in normal clothes, jeans, a vintage band t-shirt, and a gray cardigan that seemed too large for her frame. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the hospital gown and oxygen mask, the resemblance between them was even more striking. Blake stood as they approached the table. "Chloe, thank you for coming." She nodded, sliding into the seat across from him. "This is Jason, my friend." The young man, tall, lanky, with glasses and an earnest expression, extended his hand. "Jason Reeves. Nice to meet you, sir." Blake shook his hand, noting the protective way Jason hovered near Chloe. "Blake Mitchell. Would you like to join us?" "No," Chloe interjected before Jason could respond. "He's just here because my mom insisted I bring someone. He'll wait over there." She gestured to a table across the cafe. Jason gave her a concerned look. "You sure?" "I'm fine," Chloe assured him. "Go work on your thesis or something." Jason squeezed her shoulder gently before moving away, settling at a distant table but keeping them in his line of sight. "Boyfriend?" Blake asked, once they were alone. Chloe rolled her eyes. "No, best friend since 6th grade, and he's gay, so don't start with the overprotective father routine." "I wasn't going to," Blake said mildly. "Would you like something to drink? I asked them to have hot chocolate ready, but they can make whatever you'd prefer." Chloe seemed surprised by this consideration. "Hot chocolate is fine, but I can pay for myself." "I'm sure you can," Blake agreed, "but I'd like to buy you a hot chocolate if you'll let me." After a moment's hesitation, Chloe nodded. Blake signaled the barista, who brought over the waiting drink, topped with whipped cream and chocolate shavings. "Thanks," Chloe said, wrapping her hands around the warm mug, but not drinking yet. She studied Blake across the table. You look like your pictures. The ones in business magazines. You've seen those? Blake asked, surprised after what Vanessa had told him. I Googled you, Chloe admitted, after Mom told me who you are. Blake Mitchell, billionaire real estate developer. You own half of Manhattan, according to Forbes. Not quite half, Blake replied with a small smile, but a respectable portion. Chloe didn't return the smile. Why didn't you want me? The directness of the question caught Blake off guard, though he should have been prepared for it. It wasn't about not wanting you, Chloe. I didn't know about you. Mom says she tried to tell you. She did, Blake acknowledged. Once. I missed the message. That was my fault. My failure. He searched for words that wouldn't sound like excuses. I was obsessed with building my company. I shut everything else out, including your mother's attempts to reach me. Chloe took a sip of her hot chocolate, considering this. But you never checked back? Never wondered if there might have been something important in that message? No, Blake admitted. I was angry about the divorce. Hurt. I channeled all of that into work. It was easier than dealing with the pain. So you just erased her. Erased that whole part of your life. I tried to, Blake said honestly. It didn't work. Not really. But I convinced myself it had. Chloe's direct gaze was disconcerting. And now, you're here playing the concerned father because what? Guilty conscience? Public image? Tax write-off? Blake felt a flare of irritation at her cynicism, then reminded himself that she had every right to question his motives. I'm here because you're my daughter, he said simply, because you need medical treatment that I can help provide. And yes, because I feel guilty about missing your entire life, but not because of public image or tax benefits. You could have just sent money, Chloe pointed out, written a check and gone back to your skyscrapers. Is that what you'd prefer? Chloe looked away. I don't know what I prefer. I don't know you. You're a stranger who happens to share my DNA. The words hurt, but Blake nodded. That's fair. I am a stranger, but I'd like the chance to change that. Why? Chloe challenged, meeting his gaze again. You've done fine without a daughter for 18 years. I've done fine without a father. Why change things now? Because now I know, Blake said simply. I can't undo the past, Chloe. I can't recover the years I missed, but I can be here now, if you'll let me. Chloe studied him, searching for sincerity or deception. You've never been married again? Never had other kids? Blake shook his head. No, neither. Why not? I focused on work, Blake answered, then added more honestly. And I never found anyone who mattered as much as your mother did. Chloe absorbed this, her expression unreadable. Did you love her? Really love her? Yes, Blake said without hesitation. More than I realized at the time. Then you made a pretty stupid choice, Chloe observed, a hint of her earlier sharpness returning. Despite himself, Blake smiled. Yes, I did. Chloe seemed surprised by his agreement. She took another sip of her hot chocolate, leaving a smudge of whipped cream on her upper lip. The childlike image contrasted sharply with her mature demeanor, reminding Blake painfully of her youth, of all he had missed. The first procedure is tomorrow, Chloe said, changing the subject. They'll harvest your stem cells. Blake nodded. Yes. Dr. Lindstrom explained the process. It's relatively straightforward for me. But not for me, Chloe said quietly. The pre-treatment is rough. Chemo to kill off my existing bone marrow. High risk of complications. I know, Blake acknowledged. I've been researching the protocol. But Dr. Lindstrom is one of the best in the field, and the success rates for compatible family donors are promising. Chloe met his gaze directly. I might die anyway. The blunt statement hit Blake like a physical blow. That's not going to happen. It might, Chloe insisted. I need you to know that before you invest too much in this whole father-daughter reunion fantasy, there are no guarantees. If you're here because you think saving my life will redeem you or give meaning to your existence or whatever, you should know it might not work out that way. Blake leaned forward, his voice low and intense. I'm not here for redemption, Chloe. I'm here because you're my child. Whether you want me in your life or not, whether the treatment works or not, that fact doesn't change. I'm here. Period. Something shifted in Chloe's expression, not acceptance, exactly, but perhaps a grudging recognition of his sincerity. "I have to get back to the hospital," she said, checking the time on her phone. "Pre-treatment starts this evening." Blake nodded. "May I visit you tomorrow? After my procedure?" Chloe hesitated, then shrugged. "If you want. It's not going to be pretty. I'll probably be puking my guts out from the chemo." "I'll be there," Blake promised. Chloe stood, gathering her bag. "Jason will drive me back." She paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Thanks for the hot chocolate." "Anytime," Blake replied, rising as well. "Chloe, thank you for giving me this chance to talk. It means more than you know." She nodded once, awkwardly, then turned and walked to where Jason waited. Blake watched them leave, his daughter leaning slightly on her friend for support, her small figure already visibly tired from their brief meeting. Only when they had gone did Blake sink back into his chair, emotionally exhausted from the encounter. He had expected anger, questions, even accusations. He hadn't expected Chloe's brutal honesty about her prognosis or her clear-eyed assessment of his motivations. She was right, of course. There were no guarantees. The treatment might fail. And then what? Would he return to New York, to his empire, leaving behind another failure, another loss? No, Blake decided, with a certainty that surprised him. Whatever happened, he would not abandon Chloe again, even if she never accepted him as her father, even if the worst occurred. He was here now, and he would stay. With renewed determination, Blake gathered his things and left the cafe. He had calls to make, arrangements to finalize. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a medical battle for Chloe's life, but also, perhaps, the start of something neither of them had anticipated, a relationship built not on obligation, but on choice. The harvest procedure was relatively simple for Blake, 4 hours in a hospital bed while machines filtered stem cells from his blood. The discomfort was minimal, a small price to pay for potentially saving his daughter's life. When it was over, he insisted on seeing Chloe immediately, despite the medical team's recommendation that he rest. Blake Mitchell had built an empire by ignoring such recommendations when they conflicted with his priorities. He found Vanessa outside Chloe's room, her face drawn with worry. "Blake, how are you feeling?" "Fine," he dismissed. "How is she?" Vanessa sighed. "The pre-treatment is hitting her hard. High fever, nausea. She's been sick most of the night." "Can I see her?" "She's sleeping now," Vanessa said. "Finally. It's better not to disturb her." Blake nodded, accepting this medical necessity where he would have bulldozed past other obstacles. "When she wakes, then I'd like to be here." Vanessa studied him, then gestured to the waiting area. "We should talk." They sat in the same uncomfortable chairs where they'd spoken on that first night. Vanessa looked exhausted, her usually impeccable appearance showing signs of strain. "Chloe told me you met yesterday," she began. "Yes," Blake confirmed. "She had questions. I tried to answer them honestly." "That's good," Vanessa said. "Honesty is all she's ever wanted. It's all any of us want, really." Blake felt the subtle rebuke. "I know I should have tried harder to stay in contact after the divorce. If I had, perhaps." "We can't change the past, Blake," Vanessa interrupted gently. "We can only deal with what's in front of us now." Blake nodded, letting go of the useless hypothesis. "Tell me what to expect with her treatment. The medical team explained the clinical aspects, but I want to understand what she'll be going through." Vanessa's expression softened at his genuine concern. "It's brutal, to be honest. The chemo will destroy her immune system, making her extremely vulnerable to infection. She'll lose her hair, have little energy, struggle with nausea and pain. It will get worse before it gets better. And after the transplant? If all goes well, her body will accept your stem cells, and they'll begin producing healthy blood cells. It's a slow process. Weeks, possibly months, before we know if it's working. Even then, she'll need ongoing care, monitoring for complications." Blake absorbed this, his mind already calculating how to rearrange his life to accommodate these needs. "I meant what I said the other day. I'm here for as long as it takes." Vanessa nodded. "I believe you. But Blake, there's something else you should understand. Chloe is." She searched for the right words. "She's guarded. Independent to a fault, She doesn't let people in easily. Like her mother, Blake observed with a small smile. And her father, Vanessa countered. Don't expect her to suddenly embrace you as her long-lost dad, even if your cells save her life. That's not how she processes things. I don't have expectations, Blake said. Only hope and patience, which I've learned over the years. Vanessa looked skeptical. Patience was never your strong suit. People change, Blake replied simply. 18 years is a long time. Before Vanessa could respond, a nurse appeared in the doorway. Miss Reynolds, Chloe's awake and asking for you. Vanessa stood immediately. Thank you. She turned to Blake. Give us a few minutes. I'll let you know when she's ready for visitors. Blake nodded, settling back to wait. His phone buzzed with messages from his executive team. But for once, he ignored them. Business could wait. His daughter could not. 15 minutes later, Vanessa reappeared. She says you can come in, just don't stay too long. She tires easily. Blake followed Vanessa to Chloe's room, steeling himself for what he might find. Despite his preparation, the sight of his daughter shocked him. In just one day, she seemed to have deteriorated dramatically. Her skin had a grayish cast, dark circles shadowed her eyes, and an IV delivered fluids and medications to her weakened body. A hospital basin sat within reach, evidence of her ongoing nausea. But when she looked up at him, her amber eyes, his eyes, still held that same direct intensity. Hey, she said, her voice weaker than before, but still distinctly Chloe. You survived the vampire treatment, I see. Blake moved to her bedside, careful not to disturb any of the medical equipment. It was nothing. How are you feeling? Like death warmed over, Chloe replied bluntly. They weren't kidding about the chemo side effects. Is there anything I can do? Blake asked, feeling helpless in the face of her suffering. Anything you need? Chloe shook her head slightly, then winced at the movement. Unless you can make this stop without killing me, not really. Vanessa stepped forward. I'm going to get some coffee. Blake, would you like some? He recognized her attempt to give them privacy. Black, please, thank you. When Vanessa had left, Blake carefully sat in the chair beside Chloe's bed. I brought something for you, if you feel up to it. Chloe raised an eyebrow. A pony? Blake smiled at her sarcasm. Not quite. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. It's not much. Just something I thought you might like. Chloe eyed the box suspiciously. If that's jewelry, I should warn you, I'm not much of a jewelry person. It's not exactly jewelry, Blake said, opening the box to reveal a simple silver pendant in the shape of a treble clef, hanging on a delicate chain. It belonged to my father. Music was his passion before business took over. I thought, since you're a musician. Chloe's expression softened as she looked at the pendant. She reached out a thin hand to touch it gently. Your dad was a musician? A pianist, Blake confirmed. Never professionally, but he was talented. He played Chopin beautifully, that nocturne you were listening to when I first arrived. Mom never told me that, Chloe said quietly. She might not have known, Blake replied. My father died before your mother and I met. The pendant was his good luck charm. He wore it when he performed, even if it was just for family. Chloe continued to study the pendant, clearly touched despite her determination to remain aloof. Thank you, she finally said. It's nice. Really. Blake closed the box and set it on her bedside table. When you're feeling better, you can decide if you want to wear it. They sat in silence for a moment. Less awkward than before. Mom says you've arranged to stay in Boston indefinitely, Chloe said eventually. What about your company? Mitchell Industries will survive without my physical presence, Blake assured her. I've built an excellent team over the years. But you're the CEO, the founder, the guy with his name on the building. Blake shrugged. Titles and buildings matter less than people. Something I learned too late in life, unfortunately. Chloe studied him with that penetrating gaze. You really mean that, don't you? I do, Blake confirmed. Though I wouldn't have 18 years ago. Back then, the company was everything. What changed? Chloe asked. Blake considered the question carefully. Success, ironically. I achieved everything I set out to accomplish professionally. Built the empire, made the billions, saw my name in lights, and discovered it wasn't enough. That there was he searched for the right word, an emptiness to it all. Chloe nodded slightly, seeming to understand. Mom calls it the achievement treadmill. Always running toward the next goal. Never stopping to ask why. Your mother was always insightful, Blake acknowledged. It was one of the things I loved about her. You still care about her, Chloe observed. It wasn't a question. Yes, Blake admitted. I always have, though I didn't allow myself to acknowledge it for many years. A shadow crossed Chloe's face, quickly suppressed. She shifted uncomfortably, then grimaced in pain. Should I call the nurse? Blake asked, immediately concerned. No, Chloe said through gritted teeth. It comes and goes. Just talk about something else. Distract me. Blake cast about for a suitable topic. Tell me about your music. Your mother mentioned you compose? Chloe nodded, relaxing slightly as the pain subsided. Yeah. Mostly contemporary, classical, and experimental electronic stuff. Not exactly commercial. I'd love to hear it sometime, Blake said sincerely. Sure, Chloe said, though she sounded doubtful. Most people find my compositions kind of intense, discordant. I appreciate intensity, Blake assured her, and there's beauty in dissonance when handled skillfully. Chloe looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected him to understand. That's what I try to explore, the line between harmony and discord, the moment when tension resolves. Like in business negotiations, Blake observed. The art is in the balance, creating enough tension to drive movement while maintaining the relationship. Huh, Chloe said thoughtfully. I never thought of it that way. They continued talking about music, finding unexpected common ground in their appreciation for complexity and structure. Blake shared stories of his father's musical pursuits, while Chloe described her compositional process. For brief stretches, they almost forgot the circumstances that had brought them together, the hospital room, the illness, the years of separation. When Vanessa returned with coffee, she found them engaged in animated conversation about a contemporary composer they both admired. She hesitated in the doorway, not wanting to interrupt the first genuine connection she'd witnessed between them. But Chloe's energy was clearly waning, her responses becoming slower, her eyelids heavy. Vanessa stepped forward. I think Chloe needs to rest now. Blake noticed his daughter's fatigue and nodded immediately. Of course. He stood, carefully avoiding the IV lines. I'll come back tomorrow, if that's all right. Whatever, Chloe mumbled, but there was less edge to her dismissal than before. Bring me some decent hospital food if you want to be useful. Blake smiled. I'll see what I can arrange. As he turned to leave, Chloe called after him, her voice suddenly small. Blake? Thanks for, the cells and stuff. Anytime, Blake replied, his throat unexpectedly tight with emotion. That's what fathers are for. The words slipped out before Blake had fully considered them, hanging in the air between them. Chloe's expression flickered surprise, confusion, perhaps a touch of yearning quickly suppressed. Right, she said finally, looking away. See you tomorrow. In the hallway, Vanessa touched Blake's arm lightly. That went well, she said quietly. I haven't seen her that engaged since she was admitted. Blake nodded, still processing the connection he'd felt with his daughter. She's extraordinary, Vanessa. Her understanding of music, her insights. She gets that from both of us, Vanessa acknowledged. Your analytical mind, my creative perspective. Thank you, Blake said suddenly, for raising her to be who she is, for doing it so well without me. Vanessa's eyes softened. It wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. She hesitated, then added, You should get some rest. The stem cell procedure takes more out of you than you realize. I'm fine, Blake dismissed automatically, though he did feel unusually tired. But I'll head back to the hotel. Call me if anything changes with Chloe. I will, Vanessa promised. Over the next week, a pattern emerged. Blake would arrive at the hospital early each morning, laptop and files in hand, and set up a makeshift office in the family waiting area. He would work remotely until Chloe was awake and feeling well enough for visitors. Sometimes this meant brief, 10-minute conversations. Other days, when the nausea and pain were overwhelming, he simply sat quietly beside her bed while she slept, reviewing contracts or taking conference calls in whispered tones. As promised, Blake arranged for gourmet meals to be delivered whenever Chloe felt able to eat, working with her doctors to ensure everything met her dietary restrictions while still tasting better than standard hospital fare. When even these carefully prepared dishes were rejected by her sensitive stomach, he brought ginger tea and specialty ice pops that sometimes stayed down. Vanessa watched this transformation of her ex-husband with cautious optimism. The Blake she had known would have delegated such caretaking, outsourcing the emotional labor to assistants or medical staff. This Blake stayed, present and engaged, despite Chloe's mood swings and occasional sharp rejections. 8 days after the initial stem cell harvest, Blake arrived to find Chloe's room empty, the bed stripped. Panic seized him as he rushed to the nurse's station, horrible scenarios flashing through his mind. "Chloe Reynolds," he demanded, his CEO voice returning in full force. "Room 612. Where is she?" The nurse looked up, unintimidated by his tone. "Miss Reynolds was moved to the transplant unit this morning. 8th floor, room 842. Her mother is with her." Blake's panic subsided, replaced by excitement tinged with apprehension. They were moving forward with the transplant, his cells into Chloe's body. The next critical phase had begun. He found them in the new room, which was sealed with additional precautions to protect Chloe's now non-existent immune system. He had to don a gown, mask, and gloves before entering, a sobering reminder of her vulnerability. Chloe lay in the bed looking smaller than ever, her hair now completely gone, her skin almost translucent. The sight stopped Blake in his tracks. Despite her weakened state, she managed a faint smile when she saw him. "Check it out," she said, her voice thin but determined. "I'm rocking the alien look." Blake moved to her bedside, careful to maintain the sterility of the environment. "I think it's more of a warrior monk aesthetic," he countered, keeping his tone light, despite his concern. "Very zen." Vanessa, seated on Chloe's other side, gave him a grateful look for his easy response. "They're prepping for the transplant now," she explained. "Should begin within the hour." Blake nodded, turning his attention back to Chloe. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone scraped out my insides with a rusty spoon," Chloe replied matter-of-factly. "But apparently, that's the point. Kill everything so your cells can move in and take over." "My cells will behave themselves," Blake promised. "They know better than to cause trouble." Chloe rolled her eyes, but a ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Right. Because you've totally got control over your stem cells." "Of course," Blake replied with mock seriousness. "Mitchell cells always follow orders. It's in our DNA." "You're ridiculous," Chloe said, but the insult lacked any heat. A nurse entered, carrying a bag of clear fluid, labeled with Blake's name and donor information. "Ready for your new cells, Chloe." Chloe's bravado faltered momentarily. She reached out instinctively, grabbing Blake's gloved hand with surprising strength. Blake squeezed back gently, understanding without words what she needed in that moment. Not a donor, not a long-lost father trying to make amends, but simply another human being to anchor her through her fear. "I'm right here," he said quietly. "Not going anywhere." Vanessa took Chloe's other hand, and together they watched as the nurse connected the bag to Chloe's central line. The procedure itself was anticlimactic, no different from a standard IV infusion, but the significance of the moment hung heavy in the room. Blake's cells flowing into his daughter's body, carrying the hope of healing, of a future. "Now what?" Chloe asked as the nurse finished. "Now we wait," the nurse replied. "The cells need time to find their way to your bone marrow and set up shop. Dr. Lindstrom will be in shortly to explain the next steps." After the nurse left, Chloe maintained her grip on both Blake and Vanessa's hands, creating a circuit of connection that felt profound in its simplicity. For the first time, Blake had the sense that they were functioning as a family unit, however unconventional. "I'm scared," Chloe admitted, her voice barely audible. "It's okay to be scared," Vanessa assured her. "We're scared too." Blake nodded in agreement. "But we're here, Chloe, both of us, and we're not leaving." Chloe looked between them. These two people who had created her but never raised her together. now united in their determination to see her through this crisis. "Promise?" she asked, suddenly sounding much younger than her 18 years. "Promise," Blake and Vanessa replied in unison. The days following the transplant were among the most difficult Blake had ever experienced. Chloe's body, depleted by the pre-treatment and struggling to adapt to the new cells, grew weaker. Infection set in despite the stringent precautions, sending her temperature soaring and her blood pressure plummeting. For 72 hours, Blake and Vanessa maintained a constant vigil, taking shifts but never leaving the hospital. Blake conducted essential business from his laptop in the waiting room, delegating everything else. When his executive team questioned his continued absence, he silenced them with a curt email. "Family emergency continues. Handle it or find new employment." No one questioned him again. On the fourth night after the transplant, Blake sat alone beside Chloe's bed while Vanessa reluctantly went home to shower and change clothes. Chloe had been drifting in and out of consciousness, the infection and high doses of medication keeping her mostly unaware of her surroundings. Blake worked quietly on his tablet, occasionally glancing up to check the monitors or to gently moisten Chloe's parched lips with a sponge. He was reviewing the quarterly projections for Mitchell Industries' Asian division when he realized the numbers were blurring before his eyes. He set the tablet aside and rubbed his face, exhaustion finally catching up with him. "You look terrible." The weak voice startled him. Blake looked up to find Chloe watching him through half-lidded eyes, more lucid than she'd been in days. "Hey," he said softly, leaning closer. "You're awake." "Apparently," Chloe murmured. "You need to sleep. You look like a walking corpse." Blake smiled despite his worry. "I've been told I have a face for business, not modeling." "Not what I meant," Chloe replied. "You're going to make yourself sick, and then who's going to run your empire?" "The empire can wait," Blake said simply. "How are you feeling?" Chloe considered the question. "Less like I'm actively dying, more like I've been hit by a truck. Progress, I guess." Blake reached for the call button. "I should get the nurse." "Wait," Chloe said, stopping him. "Just wait a minute. I want to ask you something." Blake withdrew his hand. "Anything. Why didn't you fight for Mom? For your marriage?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Chloe, I don't think now is—" "I might not get another chance," Chloe interrupted, her voice stronger than it had been in days. "My white cell count is still basically 0. This infection could kill me. So humor me." Blake felt the weight of her mortality, of all of their mortality, pressing down on him. "I was a fool," he said finally, the admission coming more easily than he'd expected. "I thought I could have everything. Success, wealth, power, and that your mother would wait until I achieved it all. When she left, my pride was wounded. I convinced myself that if she couldn't support my ambitions, I was better off without her." "That's a crappy reason," Chloe observed. "Yes," Blake agreed. "It was. Do you still love her?" Blake hesitated, then decided that Chloe deserved complete honesty. "I never stopped. I just buried it under work and achievement and the belief that what I was building was more important than what I'd lost." "She never got over you either," Chloe said quietly. "She dated occasionally, but no one lasted. She always found something wrong with them. I used to think she was just picky. Now I wonder if she was comparing them to you." Blake absorbed this revelation, trying not to read too much into it. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman. She deserved better than what I gave her." "Yeah," Chloe agreed. "She did. She studied him with those penetrating amber eyes. But people change, right? That's what you said." Before Blake could respond, Chloe's eyes drifted closed, the brief surge of energy depleted. He sat in silence, contemplating her words, the possibility they contained, until Vanessa returned half an hour later. "Any change?" she asked, hanging her coat on the back of the door. Blake nodded. She woke up for a few minutes, more lucid. The nurse came in and said her numbers are improving slightly. Relief washed over Vanessa's face. Thank God. She took the seat on the opposite side of Chloe's bed, her hand automatically moving to smooth the blanket, a maternal gesture that spoke volumes about her years of care. "You should go back to the hotel," she told Blake. "Get some real rest. I'll call if anything changes. Blake shook his head. I'm staying. Vanessa looked as if she might argue, then seemed to think better of it. They sat in companionable silence, united in their vigil, until Vanessa spoke again. She's like you, you know. Blake looked up, surprised. Is she? Vanessa nodded. When she sets her mind to something, nothing deters her. When she was 12, she decided she wanted to perform at Carnegie Hall. She practiced 6 hours a day for months, entered every competition she could find, networked with judges and music directors. Pure determination. Did she succeed? Blake asked. Yes, Vanessa said with quiet pride. National Young Composers Showcase. Standing ovation. She smiled at the memory. Just like you, with that first property in Queens. Everyone said it was too ambitious, but you made it happen through sheer willpower. Blake felt a warmth spread through his chest at the comparison. I wish I'd been there to see her perform. She recorded it, Vanessa said. I have the video at home. I'd love to watch it sometime, Blake said, when all this is behind us. Vanessa met his gaze across their daughter's sleeping form. I'd like that. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility, before Blake's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. He glanced at it, frowning. Problem? Vanessa asked. Nothing that can't wait, Blake replied, silencing the device. But Vanessa knew him too well. Blake, if you need to handle something, go ahead. I'm here. Blake hesitated, then sighed. It's the Chicago development. The anchor tenant is threatening to pull out unless we make significant design changes. Changes that would compromise the entire concept. Then don't compromise, Vanessa said simply. It's not that easy. Without the anchor tenant, the financial model doesn't work. The board is pushing for the changes. Since when does Blake Mitchell let the board dictate his vision? Vanessa challenged. The Blake I knew would find another solution. Blake smiled slightly. The Blake you knew didn't have a daughter in the hospital taking priority over business concerns. Vanessa's expression softened. Go. Take the call. Handle it your way. Chloe and I will be fine for an hour. Blake stood reluctantly. You'll call. Immediately, if anything changes, Vanessa promised. Now go save your building before your board destroys it. Blake nodded gratefully and stepped out to the waiting area. For the next 45 minutes, he was CEO Blake Mitchell, decisive, strategic, unwavering. He proposed an innovative solution that would save the project without compromising its integrity, overriding the board's objections with the sheer force of his conviction. When he returned to Chloe's room, he found her awake again, engaged in quiet conversation with Vanessa. There he is, Chloe said, her voice stronger than before. Mom said you were off saving the corporate world. Just a building, Blake replied, relieved to see her improvement. Nothing important. Mom says it's your passion project, Chloe countered. Mixed income housing with environmental innovations. Sounds pretty important to me. Blake glanced at Vanessa, surprised she had remembered the details of a project he'd mentioned only in passing. It's trying to balance profitability with social impact, he explained to Chloe, proving that ethical development can also be good business. That doesn't sound like the ruthless tycoon the business press describes, Chloe observed. Maybe the business press doesn't know everything, Blake replied. Chloe studied him thoughtfully. Maybe they don't. As Chloe's condition gradually stabilized, Blake fell into a new routine. Mornings at the hospital, afternoons split between Chloe's bedside and remote work, evenings reviewing architectural plans with Vanessa, who offered valuable insights from her years of teaching at MIT. 2 weeks after the transplant, Dr. Lindstrom delivered the news they had been waiting for. Chloe's body was showing the first signs of accepting the transplanted cells. Her white blood cell count, while still dangerously low, had begun to rise. It's very early, Dr. Lindstrom cautioned, but this is a positive indicator. If the trend continues, we can begin thinking about discharge planning in another week or two. The timeline was longer than Blake had initially anticipated, but the prospect of Chloe's recovery outweighed any other consideration. He immediately extended his hotel reservation indefinitely and instructed his Boston real estate team to find a suitable property for longer-term use. That evening, as Chloe slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, Blake and Vanessa found themselves in the hospital cafeteria, sharing a late dinner of questionable sandwiches and surprisingly decent coffee. "You're planning to stay in Boston," Vanessa observed. It wasn't a question. Blake nodded. "Chloe will need ongoing care, weekly checkups, monitoring, immune support. I want to be here for all of it." "What about Mitchell Industries?" "I've been thinking about that," Blake admitted. "The company has outgrown the need for my daily involvement. The current management team is excellent. I've been considering stepping back into a chairman role for some time." Vanessa studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "That doesn't sound like the Blake Mitchell I knew." "People change," Blake reminded her. "Priorities shift." Blake reminded her. "Because of Chloe?" "Partly," Blake acknowledged. "But it started before I knew about her. Success without meaning is empty. I've built buildings, made money, expanded into new markets. But to what end? What's the purpose of it all?" Vanessa's expression softened. "I asked you that question once, the night before I left." "I remember," Blake said quietly. "I didn't have an answer then. Or rather, well, Endifor. Well, when now they're Endifor. When now they're Endifor. When now they're. When now they're. When now they're. Endifor. When now they're. When now they're. Endifor." I thought the answer was obvious success for its own sake. Build the biggest company. Make the most money. Win at all costs. And now? Blake met her gaze directly. "Now I know that none of it matters without people to share it with. Without relationships that give it meaning." Something shifted in Vanessa's eyes, a recognition, perhaps even a hope. But before she could respond, Blake's phone rang. He glanced at it, frowning when he saw the name. "I should take this," he said. "It's Robert Harrington, chairman of the board." Vanessa nodded, and Blake stepped away to take the call. When he returned a few minutes later, his expression was grim. "Bad news?" Vanessa asked. "Potentially," Blake replied, sitting down heavily. "The board has called an emergency meeting. There's concern about my extended absence and some decisions I've made recently, particularly rejecting the design changes in Chicago and pulling out of the Singapore expansion." "What does that mean?" Blake sighed. "It means they're considering a motion to have me step down as CEO, not just to chairman, but completely out of operational control." Vanessa looked shocked. "Can they do that? You're the founder, the majority shareholder." "Not majority anymore," Blake explained. "I diluted my ownership during the last expansion. I still have the largest individual stake, but if enough board members align against me, what will you do?" Blake considered the question. 6 weeks ago, the prospect of losing control of Mitchell Industries would have been unthinkable, a catastrophe worth any sacrifice to prevent. Now, looking across the table at Vanessa, knowing Chloe was recovering upstairs, his perspective had fundamentally shifted. "I'll fight if I have to," he said finally, "but not at the expense of being here for Chloe, for both of you." Vanessa reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "You really have changed." The warmth of her touch sent an electric current through him, awakening feelings long suppressed. Blake turned his hand to clasp hers. "Vanessa," he began, his voice lower, more intimate. "These past weeks, working together for Chloe, spending time with you, it's reminded me of what I lost, what I threw away." Vanessa's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't withdraw her hand. "Blake." "I know," he interrupted gently. "It's complicated. There's history, hurt, 18 years of separate lives. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know that reconnecting with you has been significant, regardless of what happens with the company or anything else." Vanessa was silent for a long moment, her thumb unconsciously tracing small circles on his hand. "For me too," she finally admitted. "But Chloe has to be our priority right now. She's still so vulnerable, medically and emotionally." "Absolutely," Blake agreed. "Her recovery comes first. Everything else is secondary." Vanessa nodded, slowly withdrawing her hand. "You should go to New York, fight for your company." Blake looked surprised. "What?" "The board meeting," Vanessa reminded him. "If it's as serious as you say, you should be there in person. Make your case. I'm not leaving, Chloe, Blake insisted. It would only be for a day or two, Vanessa argued. She's stable now. The trend is positive. And Blake, she leaned forward. Mitchell Industries is your legacy. You can't just let them take it from you without a fight. Blake studied her, seeing the same strength and clarity of vision that had first attracted him to her 2 decades earlier. You really think I should go? I do, Vanessa confirmed. Chloe would say the same if she were part of this conversation. Fight for what you've built, Blake, then come back to us. The phrase come back to us lingered between them, laden with meaning beyond the immediate situation. All right, Blake decided. I'll fly to New York tomorrow, attend the meeting, and return immediately after. Vanessa smiled. Good. And Blake? Don't let them intimidate you. You're still Blake Mitchell.